Hello, Dare to Be Artsy fans and friends. Michelle Houghton here. I am bringing you a card with two pieces to it. We are going to be airbrushing a background with a Dare to Be Artsy stencil. And then we are also going to be coloring up one of the new stamps. And actually the stencil is from the new collection, but I'm also going to be coloring up a stamp from the new set, Seize the Day. And the stamp set comes with this really cute little octopus and also manatees. And today we're going to use the octopus. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a piece of cardstock and I am just drawing a simple wave pattern. So I've got 4 little waves. It's not complicated. It's not anything fancy or something I've studied how to do. It's just in my mind's eye, these 4 little kind of white caps. And I am cutting those out. I'm going to speed it up here so you don't have to watch me painfully cut this out. And I'm going to use that as a stencil to start with my airbrushing. I do a few backgrounds a year with my Copic Airbrush, and I think it's an easy, quick way to do something completely unique and different for a background to an image. So I am going to use my Copic Airbrush system, or ABS system, ABS, and I have a Copic, and I think I've selected a B04. Yeah, so I test that out to make sure I've got what I'm looking for, and I'm going to start at the bottom of the page this time, and I kind of shift the waves each time I move them, and I can even flip them over. You're going to get a peek at what piece of cardstock I actually cut up here. I always reuse my cardstock. If I am not coloring the image on the one side, I will reuse it for something else. So I don't waste cardstock when I don't have to. And I debated back and forth. Do I want the sky to show, or do I want just waves all the way through? And then I thought about the fact that I have an octopus, which for the most part is going to be underwater. So I just left the whole thing water. I'm one of these people that kind of does things or makes decisions as I'm crafting versus making a whole plan beforehand. So a lot of times you'll see me on videos in particular kind of making decisions as I go. This is one of those times. I'm not totally sure. I have kind of an idea in my head of how I want this to work out, but I'm not totally sure how that's going to happen. I'm coming back. I've got those white chunks at the bottom, and I want to make sure that those get touched real lightly. This is not a huge tutorial on the actual Copic system and how to use the that airbrush system. If you've got questions about that, please put that in the comments. I can come back and do a little more information about the Copic airbrush system, but we're focusing here on those Dare to Be Artsy products, so I want to make sure to hit those. So I'm going to bring over that stencil, and what I'm doing is I'm adding. So I've got my Y21, and I'm adding these beams of yellow, and my goal was that idea of how sunlight kind of breaks through water and you see it coming down and through the water. So if you ever are actually under the water, either scuba diving or snorkeling, you can kind of see these bands of light that kind of break through, and you can kind of see it come through. Now, notice I've gone away from the stencil to continue those bands all the way down. I know this piece of paper is going to get trimmed because it's a full card front right now, and I'm going to trim this down to fit onto a card. But I also wanted those bands to continue kind of all the way through the water. So I've practiced with the airbrush, and so I have a little more control over the width of that spray. I know about how close I need to hold it. As I get narrower, I need to thicken up some of that yellow as it's coming up toward the top because I got a little dark toward the bottom. But now they look mostly continuous, and they kind of fade toward the bottom edge, which the light or those beams of light kind of would. So then I'm going back. I've actually got my colorless blender in the airbrush now, and I'm going in those stripes in between the yellow to kind of brighten and soften that blue a little bit. And you can kind of see it happen. It's very, very subtle, but it actually kind of makes that blue pop a little bit more and lightens it up and brightens it up. And that's really exactly what I was going for. And I really just aimed right in between those yellow bands. So the second half of this procedure is going to be this little octopus. So I'm going to kind of clean up my area a little bit. I don't do as much as I should, because really, technically, I should not be coloring on top of all of my airbrush mess. If I am a heavy colorer, if I get that paper wet enough with my Copic ink, there's a chance those colors from the paper underneath will actually come up through my paper, because it'll re-liquefy those and they can come up back up through my my artwork that I'm working on now. So most of the time, little informational tip here, you want to be working on a clean absorbent surface versus something that's now been coated with ink from my Copic Airbrush system. So I've got a BV11 that I'm going to go ahead and fill my octopus in with. So I've got this nice blue violet. He's going to be a purple octopus today. I'm going down all 8 arms. One of the things about this particular card, and if you've seen some of my videos before, because the coloring portion takes a really long time, I have to speed them up quite a bit. And if you're not super familiar with YouTube, you can slow those back down by adjusting the speed. For this one, I'm actually not sped up that much, believe it or not. This is pretty close to real time. I think I only had to kind of double the speed. So this is pretty close to about how much time it took, about 20 minutes between the airbrush and the octopus versus what it's cut down to, which is about 9.5, almost 10 minutes. So I'm coming in with a BV13 and accentuating his shape a little bit. So I've kind of gone down one side of each of those legs. I've added the roundness to the top of his head. I feel like that part is kind of a ball on top of a ball. And so I've added these kind of shapes to create the roundness of his head and that portion around his eyes. So we have that feel of that form. And it gives him a little more, obviously, I don't think there's a octopus out there that's really this color or has bright cheeks or a smile for that matter, but it's sure fun to color him up. And I still want him to have actually shape and form. And so I've come back with my BV13 and BV11 to kind of soften those colors together, blend them so they're nice and smooth. And I'm loving how he looks. He is just adorable, and he's so cheery and cute. And so got him all colored up. One of the fun things about the new D2BA Artzy line is there are papers and dyes and stencils, and they all kind of go together, which is really cool. So V12 is going on the bottom, kind of the sucker portion of his legs and those little cheeks. And then I actually come back in with an R21 on his cheeks as well to kind of warm that up a little further so it's not quite so lavender, that it's a little bit pinker. And I really like the way he looks, but then I felt like he was really getting flattened by all that color a little bit. So I came back in with an opaque white. This is by Uni Pasca, and this is my new favorite opaque white. And I'm coming back in and literally dotting. Now I'm not trying to hit specific spots on his legs, because I could slow way down and hit either the black or the in-between from the stamp design. But I'm going in and adding, and I have slowed down quite a bit just to hit those long, thin lines. But I'm adding these little white dots, and I really feel like that adds a huge amount to this little critter. You're going to see here, sorry, my hand's in the way. It's can only do some of this and keep out of the way so you guys can see how I'm doing this. But it's just these little touches with this wide opaque pen, and it really makes a difference. Before I put them on the card, I actually do add a little bit a white dot on the eyes, and I'd added some of those dots on the head. So I've got this fun stencil airbrush background that he's going to float around in, and then I've also got the image. All of this is D2BA Artzy product, and I am again Michelle Houghton from scrapweaver.com. If you have a chance, come over and check out Copic in the craft room. From all of us here, today we dare you to be artsy.